All right. Well, fifth grade, we are finishing up here in chapter 8 here with this video here today. There's not going to be an actual homework assignment that's posted. We'll be doing this together as a class here at the end of chapter 8, but this is where we're at. So, but you're going to have a couple of story problems that show up on your review and test. And so I want to do a couple of examples here so you can have some extra review with those. So here's this first one. Your goal is to exercise for 15 and 2/3 hours this week. You exercise for 3 1/3 hours on Sunday and 2 3/4 hours on Tuesday. How many more hours do you need to reach your goal? Well, there's a couple ways I can do this, but I'm going to opt to say, well, let's figure out how much I've exercised so far. Because I did 3 1/3 hours on Sunday, 2 3/4 hours on Tuesday. So that seems like an addition problem to me. 3 1/3 plus 2 3/4 to figure out how much I've done so far. Well, I want to find a common denominator. That's going to be 3. That's going to be 2. And I'm looking at 4 and 3. Well, 4 times 1 is 4. Can't take 3 times something and get 4. 4 times 2 is 8. I can't take 3 times something and get 8. 4 times 3 is 12. I can take 3 times 4 and get 12. So I think it's going to be 12. Well, it's 3 times 4 that makes 12, so I'm going to do 1 times 4. And 1 times 4 is 4. Takes 4 times 3 to make 12. So I'm going to do 3 times 3. And that's going to give me 9. Then I'm going to say, well, 3 4/12 plus 2 9/12. Well, 4/12 plus 9/12 is 13/12. And 3 plus 2 is 5. And I know this is in simplest form because no number besides 1 can go into both 12 and 13. Now, normally I would take this 13/12 and turn it into a mixed number, add it to the 5, and so forth. But when you're doing multi-step story problems, sometimes you just give yourself extra work doing that. And you can kind of take care of all that at the end. Now, it says that your goal is to exercise for 15 2/3 hours this week. So really, what I'm doing is I'm subtracting, and I'm taking that 15 2/3, and I'm subtracting 5 13/12. And then I'm just going to go and I'm going to take care of everything later. Okay, now, here in this situation, I know that 12 times 1 is 12, and 3 times 4 will end up with 12. The reason I'm subtracting is this is how much I've exercised up to this point, and to figure out how much more I need to reach my goal, I've got to subtract this from my actual goal, which is 15 2/3. Well, like I said before, 12 times 1 is 12, and I can do 3 times 4 and get 12. So that tells me that my 5 13/12 is going to stay the same. This is going to have to become 15 and something over 12. Well, 3 times 4 is 12, so I'm going to do 2 times 4. 2 times 4 is 8. Well, I can't do 8/12 minus 13/12, so I'm going to have to borrow. I'm going to have to borrow from the 15, make it a 14. Now remember what I do when I have to borrow. I borrowed one whole part. So I borrowed 12/12, because that's my denominator. And so basically I'm adding 12/12 to 8/12, which means essentially I'm adding 12 to 8. And 8 plus 12 is 20. Now I can subtract, because 20/12 minus 13/12 is 7/12. 14 minus 5 is 9. Now I ask myself if 9 7/12 is in simplest form, and I believe that it is, because no number besides 1 will go into both 7 and 12. Other numbers like 2, 3, 4, 6 can all go into 12. But the only number that can go into both 12 and 7 is 1. All right, let's look at another one. That will be, I'd like a type that's on your test and review. Here we have a taxi driver that travels 5.5 miles to her first stop. She travels 3 5/8 miles less than that to her second stop. How many miles does the taxi driver travel for the 2 stops? Well, we know from where she starts to the first stop, it's 5.5 miles. She travels 3 5/8 less than that to her second stop. So to figure out how much, let me get my foot out of the way there. To figure out how much she went from the first stop to the second stop, you know it's 3 5/8 miles less than 5.5. So that's going to be 5.5 minus 3 5/8. Well, 8 times 1 is 8, and 2 will work with 8. So, because I know that 2 times 4 is 8. So my 3 5/8 is going to stay 3 5/8. And my 5 1/2 is going to become 5 and something over 8. Well, it's 2 times 4 to get 8, and 1 times 4 makes 4. Well, I can't do 4/8 minus 5/8. So I'm going to have to borrow from the 5. The 5 becomes a 4. And I'm thinking, well, I borrowed 1 whole part. So 1 equals 8 over 8, because that's the denominator I'm working with. So I'm adding the 1 that I borrowed here, the 8/8 to the 4/8, which essentially means I'm doing 4 plus 8. Well, 4 plus 8 is 12. So I'm really doing 12/8 minus 5/8 now. Well, 12/8 minus 5/8 is 7/8. Because 12 minus 5 is 7, common denominator 8 stays the same. 4 minus 3 is 1. And is that in simplest form? Well, it is. But I'm not real worried about that. It is because the only number that can go in both 7 and 8 is 1. But I'm not real worried about that because there's more to the problem. It's saying how many miles does the taxi driver travel for the 2 stops? Well, I know it's 5.5 from the beginning to the first stop. And now I figured out, because it says it's 3 5/8 miles less to the second stop, from the first stop to the second stop, it's 1 7/8 miles. So the total, I'm taking this 1 7/8 miles, which is the distance from the first stop to the second stop, and I'm going to add the distance from the beginning, that was from the beginning to the first stop, which was 5.5. Well, 8 times 1 is 8. So 2 will work with 8. So once again, it's going to become 5 and something over 8. 2 times 4 is 8. 1 times 4 is 4. I get 5 and 4/8. My 1 and 7/8 is going to stay the same. Well, 7/8 plus 4/8 is 11/8. And 1 plus 5 is 6. Well, now I've got 6 and 11/8. Well, I can't leave my answer like this. I know that this 11/8, first of all, it is in simplest form because the only number that can go into both 11 and 8 is 1. So I just need to take this 11 over 8 and turn it into a mixed number. Well, remember what that is. That's how many times can 8 go into 11. It's a division problem. 11 divided by 8. Well, 8 can go into 11 one time. If I take 8 into 11 one time, there will be 3 left over. Because if I actually went and did this problem, 8 going into 11 can go in once. 1 times 8 is 8. 11 minus 8 is 3. I would have 1, remainder 3. That's how many are left over. My denominator 8 stays the denominator 8, 1 3/8. But I have to add that to the 6, which means that I actually end up with 7 3/8. And the only number that can go into both 3 and 8 is 1. So that's in simplest form. The taxi driver drives 7 3/8 miles for the 2 stops. All right, we'll talk to you later. fifth grade. Bye.